It is every creator's kryptonite, creative block. We all know it, we all experience it, and it often seems impossible to get out of it. But this is what most creators get wrong. Creative block is not the absence of creativity, it's creativity asking for a different channel. Theoretically, any sort of channel will do, but I found one that stands head and shoulders above the rest. World building. Near the end of 2025, I found myself in a period where I'd lost all motivation and all creativity. All the projects that had been exciting just a few days earlier were now as attractive as a pile of worn socks. It seemed that the only thing I could bring myself to do was play games and watch videos. But these things didn't bring me any real joy. I was in this paradoxical state of wanting to do something while not wanting to do anything. But then, upon deciding to play another game of Teamfight Tactics, a memory popped into my head. About 2 years prior, I somehow got excited about creating a sticker business around fictional characters. Powerful demons, beautiful elves, flame-wielding creatures, that kind of stuff. But it all just felt too shallow. That's when I started world building, to give all these characters a place to live in, along with backstories, dreams, rivalries, the whole thing. I called this project Veil of Vaenyn, derived from my own name, and for a month or so it was my highest excitement. Until I threw it on a pile of discarded projects in favor of a new shiny project. Veil of Vaenyn became a thing of the past, until I remembered it. So instead of playing another game, I decided to look for my lore document, and when I found it and started reading through it, I was immediately flooded with all kinds of new ideas. Suddenly I found myself expanding the little lore that was there. Creating new characters, altering existing storylines, and establishing a whole new magic system. For 2 whole days I was obsessively working on this project, and after those 2 days I noticed that my creative juices were flowing again and my motivation was back. Motivation that turned that pile of worn socks back into a pile of glimmering gold. And so I dusted off my old projects and placed Veil of Vaenyn back on the shelf. Only this time I didn't forget about it. Far from it actually. I was expanding on the lore whenever I had a moment to myself, but it wasn't just the lore I was expanding. It was also the concept of world building as the ultimate cure for creative block. Skeptical? Good. But I invite you to stay open-minded as we go through 5 reasons to back up this statement. But first things first, what is world building? Lord of the Rings, Star Wars, Pokemon, Dungeons and Dragons, these are all examples of fictional worlds. Not just characters, not just a village, not just a single story, but a whole world. And sometimes even a whole universe. World building is the process of creating a detailed, consistent and immersive fictional setting for books, games, movies, you name it. It takes into account the construction of elements like geography, history, culture, rules, and whatever is present in the real world as well. It is essential in fantasy and sci-fi for creating believable universes and provide context for characters and conflict. Great! So, how does this help with overcoming creative block? The shift in focus creates room for creativity to flow again. Creative block often happens because of pressure. And this pressure comes in many forms. Pressure because of a deadline, pressure because of expectations from ourselves or others, or pressure by needing our art to pay the bills. There's a popular belief that pressure produces creativity, but let me tell you why this is a misconception. All pressure does is force you into action. Nothing good ever comes from forcing, at least not when creativity is involved. Creativity flourishes in a state of calm and openness, not in a state of stress and restriction. So when you find yourself facing creative block, instead of trying to force inspiration, step away. It's exactly in these moments where world building starts to show its significance. By actively shifting your focus away from where you experience the block and redirecting it to a different project, you reset your creative state. This is exactly what happened in the story I gave you in the intro. Besides pressure, another common cause for creative block comes from the stakes feeling too high for each creative decision. But in world building, you're making dozens of micro decisions constantly. What do they eat? How do they travel? What's the name for this city? What if I gave this creature 12 eyes and no arms? And none of these matter too much because nothing is permanent. This trains your brain to make creative choices quickly and with more confidence. When you return to your main work, that decision-making fluency comes with you. Think of it like a musician doing various warm-up exercises before a show. These exercises are not the music he's about to play. They don't solve the hard passages in the piece, but they do warm up the hands, loosen the fingers, and wake up the musical instincts. All of which help you play with more ease and confidence. World building is your warm-up. And just like a musician's warm-up, it's not wasted time, it's how the brain learns to move. Your brain doesn't actually distinguish between important creative decisions and unimportant ones when it comes to building neural pathways. You're training the same mental muscles either way. After an hour of world building, you've made more creative choices than you might make in a week on your blocks project. Your brain remembers what it feels like to be in a flow state, to trust your instincts, to say yes, and instead of, but perhaps, no. When you return to your main project, you won't be fumbling to find the right notes, because your fingers will know where to find them. This stepping away from your main project to do something else is what writer Alice Elliott calls a creative reset. Setting a timer for 15 minutes to engage in a creative activity unrelated to your current project. The goal of this reset is to refresh your mind and relieve pressure so that creativity will flow more freely when you return to it. So yes, any creative activity would work in getting your creative juices to flow again. But world building, in particular, has got some unique qualities that make it superior to any other creative activity. For example, it's a means to consolidate your gathered knowledge. We all go through life collecting knowledge, philosophies, and understandings that help us make sense and navigate this world. Most knowledge we process and integrate immediately. These are your everyday lessons that don't need to be explained a second time. But some knowledge does take time to process and integrate, like a tough subject at school or complex philosophies, for example. World building provides the opportunity to consolidate this newfound knowledge and translate it into narrative form. Let me explain. Around the time when I picked up world building again, I was reading the book A Theory of Everything by American philosopher Ken Wilber. It talked about a good many things, but what really piqued my interest was on the subject of spiral dynamics. It's a model describing human and societal psychological development through stages, each with a distinct color that represents different worldviews, values, and motivations. It was fascinating stuff, but also quite difficult to fully wrap my head around. And that's when I got the idea to implement it in the world of Vaenyn. Every region in Vaenyn contains powerful magical energies that resonate at specific frequencies corresponding to different levels of consciousness development. These frequencies are met through a spiral dynamic spectrum, creating a direct correlation between geography and consciousness. They simultaneously affect the environment and shape the consciousness, physical appearance, and cultural development of the humans who dwell there over generations. Vaenyn is a fantasy world where developmental psychology becomes biology, where spiritual growth is the underlying magic system, and where every adventure is fundamentally a journey of consciousness evolution. Or in short, I had found a way to consolidate all this newfound information through play in the form of world building. Now, of course, you don't have to incorporate these big as life elements into your own world. So if you recently found a new interest in wood carving, tarot readings, marine biology, stuffed animals, miniature sword forging, or ancient pottery techniques, go make it a part of your fantasy world. Who's stopping you? It creates a renewable resource of inspiration. Most creative activities consume inspiration by transforming it into action. But world building is generative, meaning that it multiplies inspiration. Let's say you decide your world has 2 moons. Okay, cool. But now questions automatically emerge. Do people worship them? Do they have different colors? What happens when they align? Do they orbit at different speeds? Does the double moonlight affect magic or crops or tides differently? So you answer one of them. The red moon makes magic stronger and the blue moon makes it more stable. Great. But now you've created more questions. Is there a black market for magic items created during red moon peaks? What happens during an eclipse when both moons align? Do mages plan important spells around moon phases? Do sailors navigate by them? Are there moon-related cults? Each answer branches into at least 2 more questions. It's fractal. You literally cannot run out because the world itself keeps generating new possibilities. This isn't just true for your fantasy world. This generative thinking becomes a habit. You start seeing your main projects the same way, not as single problems to solve, but as rich systems where every solution opens a new creative door. It lets you work through your creative struggles in disguise. Let's say you're a sculptor and you've got a client who has asked for a piece that initially felt novel and exciting. But now that you've sat down to work on it, you find that nothing comes up. Your inspiration is gone and your mind is blank. Now, if you want to make this truly meta, you could create a fantasy world where the protagonist is a sculptor. Perhaps he's apprenticed to some grand but delusional artist. This grand artist has handed down an assignment to his novice sculptor because the subject bores him. He's too much of an established artist to bother with such menial tasks. The apprentice, however, feels like this is the single chance at proving himself. But when he sits down to work on this piece, nothing. What happens next? What does he do? How will he achieve success? Don't be surprised if an answer pops up that serves both the apprentice and you. So that's about incorporating your creative struggles into your fictional world. But there's another side to world building that turns it from a merely practical tool to a therapeutic one. And that side is revealed once you start to integrate our personal struggles as well. Now, I know that the focus of this video is on overcoming creative block and not about fixing whatever personal problems you might have. But this is such a powerful potential aspect of world building that it would feel unjust to ignore it. So, what happens when we make our personal struggles part of our world? To start with, we are then performing a core technique from narrative therapy called externalizing, which is the idea that your problems are not you and that they exist outside of you. This externalizing creates a sense of emotional distance, which limits the tendency to automatically express self-judgment and can reduce stress by interrupting negative mental chatter. But probably the most interesting concept we are then exercising is the concept of paracosms. The word consists of the Greek para, meaning beside or beyond, and cosm, which means world. It is a private fantasy world created and maintained over a long period of time, existing within its own internal logic. That just sounds like world building, right? And they are very similar concepts, but the difference is this. A paracosm is what world building looks like when it arises from inner necessity rather than creative intention. World building is a craft. Paracosm is a psychological phenomenon. They can look identical from the outside, same maps, same lore, same invented languages, but they come from different places. So why do I want you to be aware of this? Well, in a paracosm, the creator sets the laws of their world, which means they can restructure the rules around their own pain. They can make the thing that hurts them into a defeatable enemy, or turn their own confusion into a solvable puzzle embedded in the world's lore. Each challenge in the paracosm can mirror a real-life struggle, and by working through it in the fictional space, the creator can gain perspective and even confidence to face the real thing. So remember that world building could become more than just a tool, if you so wish it to be. And arguably, calling it just a tool wouldn't do it justice, because it externalizes your internal creative voice into characters you can observe. When you're blocked, you're often stuck in your own head, arguing with yourself. World building lets you turn that internal dialogue into external characters who can debate, struggle, and resolve things in ways you can observe from the outside. For example, you could have a wise mentor character who believes in taking risks, and a cautious advisor who sees all the dangers. Or a rebellious protagonist who wants to break the rules, and a society that demands conformity. Once these voices are externalized as characters, you can watch them interact and resolve their own conflict without you having to solve it directly. What I mean by this is that solutions to your character's problems will often automatically present themselves. Perhaps that rebellious protagonist doesn't ask for permission, she just acts and you get to see what happens. Or maybe she succeeds in ways you didn't expect. Maybe she fails but learns something valuable. Maybe the cautious society had a point you hadn't considered. You're essentially running simulations of your own creative dilemmas in a sandbox where the consequences aren't real. And often the resolution your characters find become the answers you needed all along. Maybe that sculptor's apprentice, stuck and frustrated as he is, creates a character in his world who faces the same block. But instead of the apprentice solving it, he watches a wise mentor in his world offer advice. The words that come through the mentor, aka the words that come through the apprentice, might be exactly what he needed to hear in order to solve his creative block. Now, I know I said 5 reasons, but there's actually a bonus 6th one that's worth unpacking before we wrap this up. It is the most accessible creative pursuit out there. The only thing you really need to start world building is imagination. But imagination is not the only thing that makes it so accessible. There are no rules and no boundaries, which in most other situations would feel debilitating, except in the world of world building. What this means is that you cannot make mistakes. There is no right or wrong. There's only what feels right or wrong, and that is completely up to you to decide. You don't need any special tools or equipment. Theoretically, you could do it all inside your head. No writing, no drawing, no nothing. Although at some point it might be wise to capture your expanding story somehow, lest you forget. Any starting point is as good as any other. This is what makes world building so great as a quick and easy creative pursuit. You might think that world building is just collecting a vast amount of narratives, and that's indeed what it could be. But who says that you need to start with the grand narrative? If the foundation of the universe feels like a too daunting task, you could start with writing about a place, a family, or just a single character. You could even start with a single sentence. In his famous novel The Hobbit, Tolkien starts with the sentence, "In a hole in the ground there lived a hobbit." At the time of writing that sentence, Tolkien himself didn't even know what it meant. It just came to mind and he put it on paper. Of course, one thing led to another, and now the Tolkien universe is perhaps the most well-known fictional universe out there. But who says you should start by writing? Maybe you feel more like drawing, and you start by drawing a map, a character, a landscape, clothing, devices, animals, really whatever. Or maybe you like to start with creating a language, and you find yourself making weird sounds throughout the day until you find something that strikes a chord. Or perhaps the people of your world communicate through music, and you find yourself writing super unique and short musical arrangements. I could go on like this, but I think you get my point. And if you're still having trouble finding a good starting point, I created a Worldbuilding Companion System Prompt to make starting out even simpler. It first helps you establish a foundation for your world if you have trouble doing so. And after that, it becomes an active building partner that maintains a living document of your lore. You remain in control of the creative decisions, while the AI documents them in a structured way, so you'll never lose sight of what's already established. The link is in the description if you're interested. Whether you use my prompt or start from a blank page, these 5 reasons all point to the same underlying truth. The creative mind doesn't compartmentalize. Neural pathways built through world building transfer to your main project. Internal debates transformed into external characters resolve themselves. Struggles processed through fictional characters resolve real ones. Knowledge integrated through narrative becomes lived wisdom. And inspiration generated in one creative space flows into another. Consciousness is not divided into important creative work and unimportant creative play. It is one unified field. What you do in the low-stakes space directly develops the capacity you need in the high-stakes space, so to speak. Knowing that I have Veil of Vaenyn to return to whenever I feel creatively drained adds another layer of trust to my work ethic. It acts like a safety net, one that lets me operate with more boldness and conviction, knowing I have a place to reset and recharge. World building isn't escapism, it's integration. It's a way to play with ideas, consolidate knowledge, and work through struggles without the weight of needing to produce something good. And in doing so, it becomes the most productive thing you can do when you feel stuck. And remember, as I said in the beginning of this video, creative block isn't your creativity disappearing, it's your creativity waiting for a different door. On this channel, I alternate between philosophy/informational videos like this one and creative project videos. If you're curious what those look like, you could watch this video where I created 12 artworks from scratch for my very first gallery show. You can also find me on Substack, where I write weekly newsletters that go deeper into topics like increasing your creative potential and intentional living. In any case, I hope to see you in the next one.